We've got a question from Samurai Sky. He's asking, why did the governor not sign off on the marijuana legislation put forward by the government? I've heard mixed stories on the topic. Also, what must happen beforehand slash, I guess, referendum for the governor to sign off on any new legislation going forward?
Okay. So really, really important question. I think this is one of that. This was one of those moments that I was alluding to earlier in terms of, I think that was a moment in time where people sort of stopped and went, hold on, sorry, the governor does what and can and why is that? And that's really sparked a debate, which I thought was a healthy thing to have in a democratic society such as Bermuda. So the decision that I made as governor was about whether to assent to the legislation, and the Constitution guides me through that process in each instance. Options being to assent, to withhold assent, or to refer it to Her Majesty. The Constitution says. So those are the three options, and I decided that, acting in my own discretion, which is what the Constitution calls on the governor to do in these instances and in others, to refer it, because it was not, on my understanding of it, my reading of the draft legislation, it was not in keeping with the international obligations that sit on Bermuda and the UK, and so referred it through to the UK for Her Majesty, as was then Her Majesty's signification through the Secretary of State. And it was that decision that came back with an instruction for me. There are really narrow instances in Bermuda's constitution where the governor is instructed by a minister or secretary of state in the UK, and this is one of them. And it was because in instances where international obligations are a question, that's one, and there are also some specified other areas in which legislation, for the most part, I sign an assent to legislation that comes through and across my desk after it's been through the House of Assembly and the Senate. And in most instances, it doesn't really call on the governor to make a decision, because it is out with the responsibilities of the governor, and so in that instance the signification is quite ceremonial, I suppose, in the system, but it was engaged because of the international obligations, and that was the reason for the decision. It wasn't because of my personal views, my political views. Mm-hmm. It wasn't because I wanted to pick a fight. It was genuinely based on the my interpretation of the international obligations and whether that would contravene it. That was why I made the decision, and it was a conversation that we'd been having for quite some time leading up to the draft bill making its way through to me.
Okay. It's interesting because I actually forgot you had overseen that. And I appreciate that question, because I honestly didn't understand it at the time either. And it helped me understand a bit more of, it's not about the personal feelings or the political position. And I think that was the part that the majority of the public had to understand.
Just a little bit more clarity. What does the international obligations mean?
So there are UN conventions which are in place, which the UK and by extension Bermuda are subject to, which talks about the circumstances in which cannabis can be legal, and most of those are for around sort of medical purposes and for research purposes as well. Sort of legalization for sort of recreational use, for sort of general use, goes beyond the constraints of the UN obligations. I think the bit that is worth separating is decriminalisation, which is a process that many other jurisdictions have already been through, and actually Bermuda has as well, which is not suggesting, as has been in the past in Bermuda and has been and was in the past in the UK as well, sort of possession of small quantities for personal use is not something that sort of, that goes through the kind of criminal justice system in that way. And those changes were made prior to my arrival, and many other territories are still trying to go through that process that Bermuda has already been through. But I don't have the legislation in front of me right now. But to be able to kind of quote, if that was a question where I was supposed to kind of quote the specific paragraphs from within, then I won't attempt to do that.